If your store or location-based business can run without you, then you truly can live anywhere. Today I'm going to show you 3 clean paths for US and Canada-based brick-and-mortar owners and other in-person business owners to be able to move abroad. We're going to go into each of those 3 steps in detail and how, step by step, to execute each one of them. Hi, I'm Justin, and on this channel, Entrepreneur Expat, we talk about everything having to do with moving abroad, starting a business, or perhaps migrating your business or making it more location friendly so that you actually can enjoy life abroad, picking the perfect country to go to, and our team can even help you with the entire relocation process from start to finish, including housing, visas, legal and accounting paperwork, and much, much more. If you're looking for hands-on support with that, just go to entrepreneurexpat.com/consult and you could book a free call with our team. If you qualify, we can support you with that. We're used to helping high net worth individuals, including business owners and investors, immigrate to countries just like Mexico, become expats, and live the lives of their dreams, whether they're still working like we are, or perhaps they're retired, or they just want to invest, have some passive income, and live on the beach and sip a margarita. Whatever you're trying to do, we can help you. entrepreneurexpat.com/consult. And if you haven't already, make sure that you subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, give this video a thumbs up. It helps us reach more people, and of course, it also will help us make sure that you are never in the dark when it comes to great content about moving abroad. We're going to help you every step of the way, whether it's through the YouTube channel, through some of our free stuff that you can download below this video, or through a consult that you can do with our team if you'd like to work together one-on-one. So lately we've been flooded with a ton of questions from American brick-and-mortar business owners, including schools, restaurants, different types of businesses in the service industry that still have offices in person, or perhaps hybrid operations, but they still manage people, they still manage operations day-to-day on the ground, and they want to move abroad to places like Mexico, Costa Rica, Europe, and more, but they just feel really chained to their location. If that's you, this episode is going to be your playbook. I'm going to show you exactly how owners in your position are making it work by either installing real management so that the store runs without them, moving the revenue online so that location stops mattering, or selling it for the right figure and redeploying that capital into a location flexible lifestyle. Now, as always, this is not legal or professional advice. This is just education and entertainment. Always consult with your tax professional. Always consult with your CPA. We do have a network of those types of people in many different countries. So if you'd like some personalized attention beyond just the scope of this video, definitely book that call at the link below. So we've been flooded with a lot of questions from a lot of those brick and mortar owners lately. That's the reason we're doing this video. They want to move abroad, perhaps to Mexico, to Costa Rica, to Europe, but they kind of feel chained to their shop. And this could be an actual brick and mortar store. Perhaps it's a consulting business. We've even had people that run schools and other things that are very in person, if you will, right? It's a little bit difficult to just say, all right, well, I'm going to run this thing that's this in person. We've got a building, a warehouse, whatever. I'm going to run that totally from overseas. And I will tell you, though, it's not impossible. We've got solutions for all of it if you're serious about moving abroad. But this episode is going to be your playbook on exactly how to do all of that. I'm going to show you exactly how owners in your position are making it work, either by installing real management so that the store effectively runs without them, or that business in person runs without them. They move their revenue online, as some have, so that the location stops actually mattering so much, or perhaps they will sell their business for the right amount and be able to redeploy that capital into something that gives them a more location flexible life, whether that's buying real estate somewhere like here in Mexico, perhaps investing in more of a local business down here, buying property to then go and either flip it or rent it out short term on Airbnb to increase those gains that they get every single year, the return on their investment. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have resources available both in the US, in Canada, and also in other countries around the world if you're looking to perhaps relocate a business somewhere else outside of where it's currently established. We work with those experts every single day. So if you book your consult at entrepreneurexpat.com/consult, if you do want a little bit more personalized attention regarding this, then absolutely go ahead and do that. And we're going to give you some more one-on-one advice for that if you qualify, and perhaps connect you with some people that can help. So there are three main options if you're looking to turn your current business that maybe you feel a little tied down to the location of into something that you can run from anywhere. Number one is you can remotify your operations with a real manager and keep the cash flow of that business. So if you've got a business, maybe you're doing 300,000, half a million, a couple million a year in revenue, but a lot of the time you kind of have to be involved still in the day-to-day. The very first thing you really want to do is put a manager in place, especially if you've got employees in person, if it's something that you can't just say, all right, well, everybody's working remotely. If your business maybe doesn't lend itself to that model, then you can remotify those operations. You can get a manager and you can keep the majority of the cash flow. And the cool thing is, even if you're going to hire a manager for $70, $80, $100,000 a year, which you could get a very, very solid operator in most places in the US for that much, if you're doing revenue of $500,000 or more, most likely you can pay that person that money and you can still have more than enough cash flow. Maybe you wouldn't have had enough cash flow to live a really good life in the US, but you can certainly take that cash flow and live extremely well in Mexico while you're growing your business, while you're building equity, and a lot of other countries in the world as well. The US is kind of crazy and ridiculous right now in terms of prices. We worked with many high net worth individuals, including multimillionaires, like that had literally $1 million, $2 million, $5 million or more in their savings accounts and their retirement accounts, just free and clear. And they're like, yeah, there's no way I would be able to comfortably retire in a place like LA or Miami or New York or even Phoenix, Arizona, because prices are going up so much. But even with just a modest cash flow of $50, $100, $150,000 a year from your business, after putting in place a manager, you can live very, very comfortably in so many different places. My wife and I live here in the Lake Chapala area. We have a very beautiful 2-bedroom condo on a mountain with double gated security. We've got a view of the entire lake all the way to the next state over, which is Michoacan. We're in Jalisco. And we pay in total for all of our living expenses under $24,000 per year. So all the rest of that money can go into savings and investments. And in fact, there's a lot of really cool investment opportunities here in Mexico as well that pay significantly more than what a lot of similar investments pay in the US. So that's another cool thing to be aware of that you can do with that cash flow. So the number two option you have is you can move the revenue of your business online so that the storefront becomes optional. This might be applicable with businesses that maybe they maintain a warehouse locally and they have people doing like packing and shipping in the case of an e-commerce vendor or something like that. You can move those to warehouses that are semi-managed or fully managed where you don't actually have to deal with any of that. You're just doing the marketing and sales of those products, and you have staff that you basically outsource that to in another business, whether that's FBA, like Fulfilled by Amazon, or some other third-party version of that that gives you a little bit more control, or that perhaps is fulfilling orders from your own store versus something like Amazon. You can move the revenue of that online. Another option is if you're in a service business, for instance, what you can do is have people work remotely. Maybe they still do go into an office, or maybe you downsize a little bit. You have a WeWork where people can go if they want to go. But a lot of roles nowadays can be done fully remotely. And in fact, if you are running a business like that, even if you still need to have meetings with them regularly, like check-ins a couple times a week or things like that, contrary to popular belief, still very popular belief that people have is that, hey, Mexico doesn't have good infrastructure. You're not going to be able to have good Wi-Fi. You're not going to be able to have good connections and things like that. And that is absolutely not true. Where we live here, even though we're like semi out in the country, we've got a gigabit up and down internet that's fiber optic, very low latency, very, very fast. It barely ever goes down. And when it does, we have a very simple cellular backup. You can use Starlink as well. It's extremely easy to run remote businesses from here, to do Zoom calls, to do whatever you need to manage that business, whether it's Mexico, whether it's Costa Rica, whether it's other countries. I've worked from Central and Eastern Europe. I've worked from Western Europe. I've worked from the Middle East. And let me tell you, back in the day, 10 or 15 years ago when I was traveling around different places like that, yes, you would occasionally have infrastructure issues. But nowadays in 2025, or whenever you're watching this video, things are working pretty well. And the other cool part is that, especially in places like Mexico that are more up and coming, where there's like small towns and things like that, or places that are kind of just getting put on the map, where there's a lot of new development. All of the infrastructure is brand new. It's not like the US where it's thousands and thousands of miles spread out and they're relying on like old, copper cable and coax and things like that to deliver DSL or shared internet speeds. Everything here is pretty much brand new fiber optic, so it is very easy to run those businesses remotely. And if you want more information about that, because we've run our own businesses now going on almost 20 years and run them from multiple countries, you can definitely book that consult below at entrepreneurexpat.com/consult, and we could talk a little bit more about your infrastructure needs and what you would need to do to make something like this happen on your end. Now, a third option that a lot of people have, and they might not even realize that they have this option, but that is to sell their business. And you could do this many ways. Of course, we're not attorneys. We're not going to tell you exactly how to structure a business sale, although we do have a lot of attorneys in our network, as well as business brokers and people that can help you evaluate your business and figure out how much it's worth. But you can typically do something like an asset sale. You can do a stock sale, and then you can redeploy. But you can typically do something like an asset sale. You can do a stock sale. You can redeploy that capital now into a location flexible life. So perhaps you want to buy a business in Mexico, like I mentioned earlier, you want to buy real estate, things like that. If you're making a couple $100,000 per year in profit, or at least EBITDA, or whatever the equivalent would be at your size of business, you may be able to sell that for $500,000, for $1 million, depending on what industry you're in. If you're doing software, obviously the multiples are going to be higher on that. If you're doing services, you still have pretty solid multiples. So you may have something that's a $500,000 or more asset just sitting there in your lap that you think that you're completely tied down to because it's your business and you created it. And right now the day-to-day is like you have to kind of be involved. But talk to a business broker, talk to us. We'll connect you with some really good business brokers. And we've also got a lot of experience actually helping companies on both the buying and selling side do things like due diligence, structure the sale, figure out how to best present a business for sale, how to document operating procedures and things like that. So absolutely reach out, email us on this channel. We'll include an email below this video, or book that consult down below as well. We can tell you potentially how much your business would sell for after connecting you with a business broker and evaluator to check the prices on that. And we can also help you structure things so that you can get the most out of your business. I'll give you a little bit of just kind of a bonus here that I wasn't even going to talk about. But here are a few sort of force multipliers that you can think about when it comes to selling your business. So one of the main things that people want to see, and I've been on the buyer side of these deals many times where I'm helping internally in that organization in the acquisitions department, and they're looking at, more than anything, can they take this thing over and have it actually be an asset for them as quickly as possible? So one of the things that determines that, of course, is, can they take your business? Does it already have all of the systems in place so that they can take your business, they can make it run without you having to be there? Because if they buy your business, but all of the client relationships are purely yours, or maybe you have one key salesperson with all of those relationships, that's an issue. So making sure that the relationships are really with the company, right? Not just with the owner. Making sure that you have contracts in place so that the owner doesn't perhaps go and compete with you and try to get those clients back to work with them. You're looking at things like standard operating procedures. Is the day-to-day documented? When we worked with companies that had purchased businesses with email lists having tens or hundreds of thousands of people on them, they want to know that those people are actually active. So are you cleaning up your email list regularly? Are you documenting how engaged your people are? Are you documenting your cleanup strategy for that list? Do you have things in place that will perhaps help that new buyer readily transition that brand over to theirs, right? So for example, when we acquire businesses, we always look at things like, are we going to be able to transfer that brand equity over? So if you're structuring your business now and maybe you're a consultant of some type, or you have a consulting business, are you branding the entire thing with just your name, or are you building brand equity in the business name? Things like that are very important. They're very often overlooked, and they can make the difference between you getting maybe $400,000 or $500,000 for a business that you've spent many, many years building, compared to perhaps getting a couple $1,000,000 or not getting a sale at all versus selling the business for something that you would be more than happy with. So you want to factor all of those things when you're planning on selling this business. Now we're going to talk about a 10-day diagnostic before you even choose which one of these strategies you're going to do. Either way, this is going to help you understand what's really going on in your business, whether you're going to sell it, whether you're going to turn it to something that's online, or perhaps put a manager in place. So here's the 10-day process. Day 1 to 2, you want to map your revenue by channel and also item number. For example, if you have 20% of items driving 80% of margin, then those are your online and SOP priorities. Specifically, you want to look at the SKU of the items that you're selling if you're in an e-commerce store, or perhaps the list of service packages and things like that if you're selling more of a service type of product, right? Days 3 to 4, look at your process inventory, understand what your processes are like, your suppliers, document all of that. Look at things like shrink if you're a retail store, right? How much of that inventory is kind of disappearing? Anything that you can't measure, you definitely can't manage remotely. Days 5 to 6, people map. Who opens the storefront? Who closes? Who's doing refunds? Who's got the keys? Who can understand all of the different aspects of management within your organization? This is going to help you decide who can actually graduate to a manager and who doesn't. Of course, we're talking a little bit more for just like the brick and mortar storefronts now, but take a different version of this as it applies to your business type. All of these concepts can be generalized to be able to fit anything. Of course, schedule that consult with us if you want us to talk about your unique situation a little bit more. Day 7 to 8, do a systems audit. Look at your point of sale, your inventory, your accounting, your scheduling, your payroll. Look at your camera systems, your alerts. Make sure you don't have things like multiple people logged in at the same time, or shared logins, shared passwords. No sort of drawer, cash drawer that's like just very easy to access. Again, if you're not dealing with a cash-based business, take this and look at it from the perspective of, hey, we've got people that are in person at this store. Do these people have more access than they should? Do these people have less access than they would need to be able to help me manage it? Do I need to perhaps put somebody else in place at that organization that's going to take over my role to manage everything on a day-to-day basis? Then days 9 through 10, you want to do a full compliance sweep. Look at the licenses, look at the sales tax, look at the insurance, the lease covenants, and things like that. You're going to need all of these things when it's time to sell anyway, or to get an SBA-backed buyer finance, or to go remote. You've got to have all of these documents in one place. I can't tell you how many businesses have just random papers in their garage. I mean, I guess that's okay if you're an ex-president and you're taking classified documents home, but if you're a serious business owner, perhaps you want to avoid that. Now we're going to dive into what these specific paths look like and how to go about doing each of them. So path A is install management and go remote. Some of the things you want to look for in a manager is that they're a numbers first operator and that they love checklists like me. I'm a big ops and systems and numbers guy, right? You want to do things like tie their compensation to weekly gross profit, shrink rate, labor percentage, net promoter score, and things like that. You can pay them monthly with some type of quarterly kicker or bonus. You're going to want to control the stack. So all around the different aspects of their role, you want to have daily things like flash reports, which are your sales numbers, your cost of goods sold, labor hours, refunds, things like that. Weekly profit and loss by location, if you've got multiple locations to your business or to your storefront. Other things, we won't get too nitty gritty because there's so many different pieces of information here, but things like monthly inventory variance, looking at your camera audits, making sure things are like the way that they're supposed to be, reconciling the bank feeds, things like that. You want to also have owner cadence in terms of how often you're going to be involved. So that might be one 60-minute KPI call a week, one process improvement a month, one surprise audit a quarter. You want to also make sure that all of your legal and HR areas are covered. So have things like written SOPs, at-will agreements with your employees and partners where applicable, and then a documented delegation of authority. So who's responsible for what? You want to also keep a US mailing address, and if you don't already have one for your corporation, you definitely want to get a registered agent set up, because ideally you have them deliver paperwork if there's any sort of legal paperwork involved, and have them deliver that to your registered agent. In some cases, depending on where you're going to move, if it's Mexico, as far as the letter of the law is concerned, if you're here in Mexico more than 183 days a year, or if your center of vital influence is here, then expect Mexican tax on all of your worldwide income. Of course, you want to talk to a CPA who understands cross-border issues like this. Now, if you're making a small amount of income, are they going to go after you, or are they going to ask you to report that income from the US? Maybe, maybe not, but it's something to bear in mind. It's something to definitely consider, and you want to look at what sorts of tax treaties and benefits and things like that that you can get both on the US side and in Mexico as you're living abroad. You also want to consider things like foreign earned income exclusion, although that's a little bit less applicable if you're running like an in-person storefront, but there are still ways to get some money back or potentially not have to pay as much in federal taxes. Now we're going to talk about path B, which is move it online, either hybrid, so partially or completely. You want to actually design your offers in a way that is conducive to having them online, right? You want to lead with your highest margin products or SKUs and any services you can productize. So think about subscriptions, bundles, refills, remote consults. We do things like this all the time. So we'll sell like a block of calls or a 90-day coaching program, a mastermind program, things like that, and it's all fully remote ready. And in fact, a lot of the things that we sell are either online courses or perhaps access to us via Slack once somebody is complete with a relocation process to like ask things about, hey, how do I ship things here from the US? Or what's the process to get my RFC, my tax ID number in Mexico? Or how do I open a bank account? And those things can be done from literally wherever we are in the world. So if we decide to go to Thailand for 6 months right now, our business continuity is still in place. We've got people in place for things that are a little bit more synchronous, like website maintenance and things like that. And a lot of our systems are asynchronous, like subscriptions, like online products, like bundles, like things like that. Or they can be flexible in the scheduling so that we don't have to work at 2 a.m. in Southeast Asia or Europe or somewhere like that. You want to think about what the most valuable product offerings are that you have right now and start to optimize those first. Next, you want to think about your infrastructure. And this one is a personal favorite of mine. I have optimized the heck out of all of our websites. We've got dozens of clients and other sites that we support. We've got online portals that we run, e-commerce sites, so many things like that. And in many cases, we've been able to improve their performance by anywhere from 2 all the way up to 10 or 15x what they were before in terms of page load times and other optimization factors, Google scores, page speeds, which factor into SEO a lot. So you want to think about your e-commerce site and make sure that it's performant. We can also help with that. By the way, we do offer white glove e-commerce and WordPress hosting for anybody that is looking to transition into more of an online or hybrid type of business from just a storefront. So we can absolutely help you with that and do it as seamlessly as possible. In addition to even building those websites, we have a team for that. We're like very full service. Amanda jokes all the time that I have too much time on my hands, so I'm creating new things and new offers. I like to keep myself busy, but all of these different offers and things we have really play well together. And so we're able to offer these things while still having a lot of consistency. So think about that e-commerce site, how you want it set up, how you want it to function, the sort of customer experience that you want to give people. Also think about a payment processor. So you can start with something like Stripe for sure if your revenues are low. They do charge a pretty hefty fee though. You're talking anywhere from about 2.9, 3% per transaction. We also have payment processors that we work with, that we're partnered with, that sometimes can get that as low as 1.5% or in some cases even better. So you want to always make sure you're getting the best bang for your buck there, because that potentially can be a savings of hundreds or thousands of dollars per year, in some cases even tens of thousands in credit card fees. So make sure you've got a really solid payment processor and have two. We say in the IT world, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So if you can absolutely have 2 different merchant accounts and have backups for all of your infrastructure, all of your servers and things like that. Don't be reliant on just one host or one IP or anything like that. You want to get your fulfillment SOP in place. So who's going to actually do the fulfillment? What's your returns policy as well on items? Keep one single source of truth for your inventory. Maybe you have that in your ERP. Maybe you have that in your e-commerce site, or they're somehow tied together. Don't have like a bunch of just split up spreadsheets to manage that in different places. So there's also important things to factor in terms of sales tax. We're not going to jump too heavily into that, but you want to think about where your nexus is. Even if you are moving overseas, where are you going to be based in terms of your business? And sometimes that's triggered by where a lot of your customers are in a lot of states as well. You need to actually track state-to-state rules before you ship for things like sales tax. Even if you're selling digital products, there's states like Texas, for example, that will make sure that you charge, so you collect, and that you also remit sales tax. Even if you're a US business, we actually had this issue with some of our clients where we billed a certain amount. It was like, I think, above 30 or 40,000 per year for a given client, and they were in a province in Canada. And then Canada started saying, hey, you need to start reporting and paying our, whatever, the 4% or 5% tax on that. So it's important to factor those things in if you haven't already. Things like platform reporting requirements, which you should be obviously paying taxes on all of your income, but the reporting requirements for platforms like Shopify, for example, have been lowering every single year. In 2026, they're going down to $600 from several thousand before they would issue you a 1099-K, where Stripe or Shopify or whoever is sending you those tax reporting forms. So regardless of what forms you receive, you always have to report all income and make sure you keep clean books. I'll make an interesting just observation here that I've seen a lot, especially in the acquisitions arena, which is that a lot of sellers or potential sellers of businesses, owners of businesses under a couple $1,000,000 tend to take a lot of we'll call them creative deductions or like sort of personal deductions where, yeah, I'm paying my nanny or whoever out of the business, or we're taking this vacation, but it was a work trip or whatever, right? And sometimes that's fine, but you also want to think about keeping clean books, especially when it comes time to sell, because yes, you can look at things like what we call seller discretionary earnings. And sometimes if you're dealing with a buyer and they're reasonable, they'll let you sort of make those carve outs for things that were essentially personal expenses that were paid via the business. But if you're trying to get approved for loans, or if you're trying to even use the income from your business to finance real estate, whether it is in the US or whether it's even overseas potentially through a US bank or a foreign bank as well, a Mexican bank, they're going to want to see the net income be at a certain level. So it's important as much as you can, and especially before major purchases and things like that, to keep very clean books. Now we're going to talk about option C, which is sell your business and do so for top dollar. Of course, I hinted about a few of the things that you can do in some of the previous sections because all of this is kind of intertwined, right? If you want to put a manager in place, just like a potential seller is going to want to put a management person in place, then you want to do certain things so that they're actually able to manage the business effectively, right? So all of these things kind of align and overlap as well. So most small deals tend to be asset sales. So when you have an asset sale, you are going to file Form 8594 and you're going to agree on the allocation. So the allocation of assets changes your tax bill, right? You've got things like goodwill, you've got FF&E, you've got customer lists, you've got other types of intellectual property and things like that. So you want to determine what sort of things get allocated where. And in any sort of business sale like this, the sellers are going to have a certain preference for things being allocated a certain way, and you're going to want to have a preference for things being allocated a certain way. That's why we always recommend working with professionals, because your tax situation is going to change drastically depending on how you actually allocate all of the different aspects of this sale. And there are ways, for example, to spread the tax over and reduce your overall tax burden. One of the ways to do this is by taking payments over time. You don't want to do this for things like inventory, but perhaps other elements of those assets that you're selling take payments over time for them. So you could have a buyer that, let's say they do get SBA approved, they get an SBA loan, and then you get the money all at once, but that's not always tax advantageous. And that's why seller financing exists, so that you can spread that tax burden up over a decent amount of time. Maybe it's 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, but you give them time to pay that off. It's potentially going to attract more buyers as well. And of course, you've got to understand all of the interest, security, and other legal implications and risks about that. Now, what buyers can finance due to SBA 7A rules is that they typically need at least 10% of equity injection for complete changes of ownership. And seller notes can sometimes cover part of it if they're on full standby, which means that you're kind of second in place for the loan, but you definitely want to confirm with your lender when you're actually ending up finalizing the process, right? Before you finalize that paperwork, you want to understand how to best do this. Again, you're always looking at all of the tax things and the legal implications and things like that. And what you're going to pay in federal long-term capital gains are typically 0, 15, or 20%, depending on your taxable income. You may have to pay state taxes as well. You want to coordinate the timing, your compensation, and your allocation with your CPA, with your business broker, and whoever else is involved in this process. All right, now one really important thing to note is that if you are moving to Mexico while you own or while you sell, your US taxes don't just magically disappear. Yes, the foreign earned income exclusion, if you're still running that business actively, you're making money, that can shelter a meaningful amount of active earned income if you qualify, but it doesn't apply to purely passive income, which might include even the distribution part of what you might get from something like an S Corp. And self-employment taxes are still going to apply. So your Social Security and Medicare, unfortunately, even if you're not planning on using it and you're going to retire in another country, those things still apply. And it's very important to make sure that you have your business structured effectively. And like I mentioned before, the Mexico tax residency can trigger a day-by-day count, right? So depending on how many days you're in Mexico or in another country, or if you have your center of vital influences in that country, you may also be responsible for taxes in that place as well and have to both report and pay taxes potentially in both countries, although there are generally treaties like with the US and Mexico to prevent double taxation. So you're not typically going to pay double tax on the same dollar. You're just going to pay the greater of whichever country has the highest tax rate is typically how it works. So here's your 90-day execution plan. Days 1 to 30, you want to come up with your owner replacement plan. You're going to want to either draft or tighten your SOPs, pick your manager, implement the KPI dashboard, and lock down those money controls. Get a pre-qualification conversation with an SBA preferred lender if your exit is on the table. If that's something you're going to do, you want to understand all of the details there. And you want to pre-qualify your business for sale because it's not just the buyer, believe it or not, that has to qualify. It's actually your business as well. So you got to make sure the ducks are in a row in that business and that the business itself will be able to pay for the servicing of the loan. That's something that a lot of people miss. Days 31 through 60, you want to choose your path. So if it's remotify your business, maybe your manager will sign a comp plan. Then you're going to ideally want to run drills while you're still in town. If you're moving online, you want to launch your top SKUs, your top products, or in the case of services, your top products. Implement sales tracking online to understand what your tax rates are, and then test at least one paid and one organic channel for traffic. And by the way, we can totally help you with that. We run an agency as well where we help people with different traffic sources. So you can book that call at entrepreneurexpat.com/consult, and we can give you a little bit more of insight into what that might look like. And if you're going to sell, hire a broker, hire an M&A advisor, get clean financials, gather due diligence paperwork up front so that you have that to present to potential buyers, and then set a realistic price based on your SDE multiples in your area, in your niche. Then days 61 through 90, you want to stress test, especially if you're going to leave the business there, you're going to have somebody management. Leave for 2 weeks domestically, no visits to your storefront. See how your business kind of fends for itself. If your operations hold, then book your international move window. And if you're selling, launch confidential marketing to potential buyers, especially through your broker. Be ready for Q&A from lenders, and then negotiate that allocation with your CPA so that they can give you a suggested allocation of those assets before your LOI or your letter of intent goes binding. Now, here are some common mistakes that kill deals as well as international trips and moves. Running payroll and sales tax in a sloppy way. Lenders and buyers will walk if everything is sloppy, and Mexican residency will also get messy if later on you need to prove ties to the US. Another thing is mixing personal and business spend. That kills bankability and remote oversight. You don't want to be commingling all of those funds. In fact, it's illegal in a lot of places, and it can potentially cause legal liability, like people being able to say pierce a corporate veil and gain personal assets directly in a lawsuit. You can't be commingling funds. It defeats the entire purpose of having a structure of a business in the first place. Don't do that. Another thing that really kills this before it even takes off is not having a proper manager incentive plan. So you've got to have somebody that's on board. They've got bonuses tied to very important key metrics in your business, reviews and net promoter scores and things like that. You also want to make sure you don't ignore sales taxes. So state sales tax is very important. You want to think about your sales state tax nexus, whenever you start shipping and fix it before a buyer or an auditor does. So in conclusion, you don't need to choose between your business and your life abroad. You just need a plan. And if you want help installing proper management, moving your revenue online, or selling your business for the right number and doing it all in a tax smart way, apply for a free consult at entrepreneurexpat.com/consult. And if you're just exploring, you want more information perhaps about Mexico, you can grab our Moving to Mexico guide at entrepreneurexpat.com/Mexico. We'll put the link below as well. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, hit that thumbs up and that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video, and you help us with our mission of reaching 1 million expats and aspiring expats. Thank you again so much for being a part of this journey. Let us know down below in the comments, do you have a business? Is it something that maybe you feel a little too chained to because it's something that's very local? Or are you just looking for a way to make money abroad? Are you looking to start a business? Let us know below in the comments. Tell us what your biggest fears are, your biggest challenges, your biggest frustrations and questions. We'd love to answer them. We try to get back to every single person that comments or emails us. We really appreciate you being here, and I'll see you again very, very soon.